Two teachers asked me to stay after class. When the door clicked shut and one of them whispered, "No homework tonight," I realized this wasn't about lessons anymore. The classroom always felt different once everyone left. The chatter, the shuffling of books, the impatient scrape of chairs against the floor, all of it dissolved the moment the last footsteps faded down the hall. What remained was silence, thick and alive, as though the walls themselves were finally exhaling. I should have left too. My notebook was already packed away, and the pale light of the setting sun told me it was later than I realized. But something in the air held me there, rooted to my seat near the back. Two of my professors hadn't left yet. Most days, they disappeared quickly, off to their cars, their lives, their obligations beyond campus. Today, though, they lingered. One of them leaned against the corner of her desk, arms crossed, a posture that seemed casual but carried a weight of intention. She was in her early 40s, elegant in the kind of way that came naturally, subtle jewelry, a fitted blouse in a deep earth tone, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. She was smiling faintly, though not at anyone in particular. The other stood near the tall windows, flipping through a stack of papers she didn't seem interested in. Every so often her eyes lifted, just enough to catch mine before darting away. She was slightly older, maybe mid-40s, with sharper lines to her features, the kind that spoke of both confidence and restraint. There was something quietly graceful about the way she carried herself, even in the smallest movements. It struck me then how unusual it was to see them together after class, not hurrying away, but staying. Watching, I slid my hands into my pockets, trying not to overthink the stillness pressing in on us. My pulse had picked up, though I couldn't have said why. Maybe it was the way the light was spilling through the windows, dust motes drifting lazily in the amber glow. Maybe it was the way they seemed almost too aware of my presence. The one at the desk tilted her head, her gaze finally locking on mine. The corners of her mouth lifted, just slightly, before she spoke. "No homework tonight." Her tone was light, almost teasing, yet something about it carried more weight than the words should have held. The other woman stopped shuffling papers, glanced at her colleague, then at me. The exchange was brief, but unmistakable, like two musicians hitting the same note at the same time without planning it. I tried to laugh, though it came out softer than I intended. My throat felt dry. That's good news, I guess. The room didn't release me, though. It felt charged now, as if the air itself had thickened, holding me in place between them. They weren't just my teachers in that moment. They were two women who had chosen not to leave, and for reasons I couldn't yet name, they had chosen me to stay behind with them. And I had no idea what was about to begin. The silence stretched, long enough for me to wonder if I should gather my things and leave. But before I could, the faint click of the classroom door pulled my attention. One of them, her heels soft against the tile, had stepped back, turned, and with a gentle push, closed it. The sound echoed in the empty room. A small, ordinary sound. And yet, it made my chest tighten. The atmosphere shifted. A closed door meant privacy, and privacy meant something unspoken was about to be revealed. I sat up straighter, every sense sharpened. The woman by the desk, the one who had spoken first, uncrossed her arms and walked a few steps closer. Her movements weren't rushed, but deliberate, the way someone approaches when they want to make sure you don't mistake their intent. She stopped just beside me, fingers brushing lightly against the edge of my sleeve. It was nothing more than the briefest touch, but the warmth of it lingered, startling in its simplicity. "You always look like you're thinking harder than everyone else," she said. Her tone was gentle, curious, almost playful, like you're carrying something you're not sure anyone else would understand. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. My instinct was to deflect, to laugh it off. But under her gaze, it felt impossible to be anything other than honest. Before I could answer, the other woman spoke. She had set the papers aside now, stacked neatly on the desk by the window, her hands folded in front of her. She didn't move closer, not yet, but her eyes stayed on me, steady, searching. "He does notice things," she said softly, more to her colleague than to me. "I've seen it. He pays attention." Their words pressed against me in a way that made my pulse quicken. I wasn't used to being studied like this, not by them. Usually, I was the observer, the one cataloging details others overlooked, the faint crease of a smile, the tremor in a voice, the hesitation in a gesture. Now, I was the subject. I cleared my throat, managing a small smile. I just don't like missing things, I guess. The teacher nearest me tilted her head, approving. Her hand, still resting near the edge of my sleeve, brushed once more, feather-light, before she pulled it back. The warmth remained long after. The woman by the window finally stepped forward. Her presence was quieter, but no less commanding. She moved with the grace of someone who didn't need to rush to be noticed. Stopping only a foot or two away, she folded her arms loosely, her expression softening. "And outside of class?" she asked. Her voice was low, calm, but there was an undercurrent to it, a weight that made the question feel more personal than casual. "What does your life look like then?" For a moment, I forgot how to answer. Their closeness, the faint trace of perfume, the quiet focus of their eyes, pulled me inward. It didn't feel like professors prying into a student's life. It felt like two women inviting me into a conversation that mattered, one that existed outside rules and roles. And in that golden silence between us, I realized something undeniable. I didn't want to leave. Not yet. The question hung there, heavier than it had any right to be. "What does your life look like outside of class?" I hesitated, fumbling for words. My life outside these walls wasn't glamorous. It was ordinary, maybe even painfully so. Work, late nights, too much coffee, thoughts I never voiced to anyone. And yet, the way she asked it made me feel as though the answer mattered. As though they were asking for something deeper than a casual response. "I don't know," I admitted finally, my voice lower than I expected. "Most days, it feels like I'm just trying to keep up, trying to figure out where I fit." The woman by the window tilted her head, as though weighing my answer. There was no judgment in her eyes, only curiosity. But before she could speak, the other one, the one still close enough that I could sense her warmth, laughed softly. It wasn't the polished laugh I'd heard in class before. This one was quieter, unguarded, edged with something like weariness. She shook her head, a strand of hair slipping forward across her cheek. "Keeping up," she echoed. "You sound like us." I looked at her, surprised. Teachers always seemed so composed, so in control, as though nothing could catch them off guard. But her expression now, it wasn't composed. It was human. She glanced toward her colleague, who gave a small nod, almost like permission. Then she sighed and leaned back against the desk, her arms loosening from their practiced cross. "Do you want to know why we stay late?" she asked, eyes flicking to me. "It isn't for the grading." "Not really." I nodded, unsure if I was supposed to answer. "It's because out there," she gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the world beyond these walls. "Everything moves too fast. Expectations, responsibilities, people who think they know us, but don't." Her voice softened, the faintest crack in it. "Here, at least for a while, it's quiet. Here, we can breathe." The woman by the window finally stepped forward, her gaze steady on me. She didn't sit, didn't lean, but there was a rawness in her tone when she spoke next. "Do you ever feel invisible?" she asked. Her words stopped me. I blinked at her, caught off guard by the sudden honesty. "Sometimes," I admitted. My throat was tight. Like, people see the version of me they want to see, not who I really am. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. She crossed the space between us and rested her hand gently on my forearm. The touch was brief, but grounding, her thumb brushing lightly against my sleeve before she pulled back. "I knew it," she murmured. "You notice things because you've been unnoticed yourself." For a moment, the room was completely still. No one moved, no one spoke. It was just the three of us, the golden light fading to shadow, and a fragile truth hanging in the air. We weren't teacher and student anymore. We were three people who had let their guard slip, caught in the rare space where being seen, truly seen, was possible. And it felt both terrifying and impossible to step away. The last of the sunlight slipped away, leaving the room bathed in muted gray. Shadows stretched across the desks, long and uneven, as if the space itself were drawing us closer together. No one had said we needed to stay, and yet none of us moved to leave. The woman at the desk reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, but her hand trembled faintly, betraying something her composed expression tried to hide. I noticed the smallest details, her silver bracelet catching the dim light, the faint tension in her jaw, the way her eyes lingered on me a fraction too long before darting away. Her colleague had taken the seat just beside me now, close enough that the sleeve of her blouse brushed against my arm when she shifted. The warmth of that touch seemed disproportionate, echoing across my skin as though my body had been waiting for it without realizing. I tried to focus, to steady myself, but every sound magnified. The faint hum of the overhead light, the soft rustle of fabric as she crossed her legs, the low cadence of her breathing. "You're quiet," the one nearest me said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's running through your head right now?" I hesitated, caught between honesty and restraint. "I'm trying to understand what's happening," I admitted, my voice low. "Why it feels so different here. With you." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, then softened. She didn't answer right away, but the faintest smile touched her lips before fading. Meanwhile, the woman at the desk stepped forward. Her movements were slower now, measured, as though she was considering every inch she closed between us. She stopped just in front of me, her presence filling the small space. "Maybe it feels different," she said quietly, "because none of us are pretending right now." The truth of her words hit me harder than I expected. Pretending. That was what we all did, wasn't it? Pretending to have it together, pretending not to notice, pretending boundaries were stronger than they were. The air tightened around us. I felt it in the way my chest rose too quickly, in the way her hand lingered near mine on the desk, without quite touching. In the way the woman beside me leaned forward, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder brushing my sleeve again. My pulse hammered. Every instinct told me this closeness was dangerous, yet something deeper, quieter, more honest, told me to stay. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, warm and floral, blending with the sharper notes of her colleagues. I could see the outline of their profiles in the half-light, graceful and steady yet undeniably fragile. And I realized with startling clarity, they were just as uncertain as I was. We hovered there, suspended in silence, none of us willing to break it first. And in that fragile stillness, it was no longer about age or roles or rules. It was about the unspoken current pulling us closer, daring us to admit what none of us could yet say aloud. The room had grown darker by the minute, the last traces of daylight swallowed by evening. Only the weak glow of the overhead light remained, buzzing faintly above us. It wasn't enough to brighten the whole space, just enough to leave us suspended in a pool of muted gold and shadow. I don't know why I spoke first. Maybe it was the silence pressing too heavily against my chest, or the way their eyes lingered on me, expectant, patient, but quietly urging. Words rose in my throat before I could stop them. "I need to say something," I began, my voice rough. Both women stilled, their movements pausing mid-shift, their attention drawn in with disarming focus. I drew a slow breath, my palms damp against my thighs. "I feel drawn to you. Both of you. More than I should. And I know it probably sounds foolish, reckless even. You're older. You're supposed to be the ones guiding me, not?" I stopped, shaking my head. My throat tightened. "Not this. Not what I'm feeling." The words hung between us, raw and trembling. I regretted them almost instantly, afraid I had shattered something fragile. My pulse roared in my ears. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. The quiet stretched until I thought I had ruined everything. But then, the one standing in front of me moved closer, so close I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind carved from years of laughter and strain. Her hand reached out, slow and deliberate, until her fingers rested over mine. The warmth of her skin against my hand sent a shiver through me. She didn't grip tightly, just pressed gently, grounding me in a way that stilled my racing thoughts. "You're not foolish," she said softly. Her voice carried no judgment, only an aching tenderness. "You're being honest. That's more than most people dare to be." The other woman leaned forward in her chair, her shoulder brushing against mine. Her face was close now, close enough that I could hear the low, steady rhythm of her breathing. She studied me as though I were something fragile, something worth seeing fully before deciding how to hold it. "It's not reckless," she whispered, her voice trembling faintly. "It's human." Her words struck deeper than I expected, unlocking something in me I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. My chest tightened, eyes burning with a sting I fought to contain. For once, I didn't feel like the younger one fumbling through uncertain steps. I felt equal, seen. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "I don't want to ruin this," I admitted. The woman at the desk squeezed my hand gently. The one beside me tilted her head, her hair brushing against my shoulder as she spoke. "You can't ruin what was already waiting to be found," she said. And in that dim, fragile light, I knew nothing would ever feel the same again. The confession lingered in the air like a fragile flame, and for the first time all evening, the weight pressing on my chest began to ease. They hadn't recoiled. They hadn't reminded me of rules, or age, or roles. Instead, they had stepped closer, softening the edges of something that had felt impossible only minutes before. The woman beside me shifted in her chair, the fabric of her sleeve brushing against mine. She leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the desk, and for a fleeting moment her shoulder pressed into my arm. The contact was small, barely noticeable to anyone else, but to me it was a quiet declaration. She wasn't pulling away. The other woman, the one who had taken my hand, didn't let go. Her thumb traced absent, delicate motions across my knuckles, not enough to draw attention to itself, but enough to anchor me in the moment. The warmth of her touch spread through me slowly, calming and steady. She let out a soft laugh, the kind born from nerves more than humor. "If anyone walked in right now," she said, her voice low, "they'd misunderstand everything." Her colleague glanced at her, a faint smile pulling at her lips. "Let them," she replied, just as softly. "We know what this is." Her words landed heavy and certain. I felt the truth of them resonate in the quiet. My heart thudded, not with fear anymore, but with a sense of release. I glanced between them. Two women who carried themselves with poise and confidence in the daylight, now stripped of those masks, showing me something raw and unguarded. And for the first time, I allowed myself to stop resisting. Slowly, I turned my palms upward, so their hands, both of them, rested more firmly against mine. One hand on my right, the other on my left. My fingers curled instinctively, holding them both. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it was real. No one spoke for a long while. The silence was no longer tense. It was safe. The kind of silence where breathing felt like enough, where the faint hum of the lamp and the rhythm of our hearts seemed to speak louder than words. I studied their faces in the soft glow. One had her gaze lowered, as though gathering strength. The other watched me openly, eyes steady, daring me to pull back, but knowing I wouldn't. I thought of the line I had always drawn between us, the invisible wall of age and expectation. Tonight, that wall felt paper-thin, and with every touch, every glance, it dissolved further. My voice was quiet when I finally broke the stillness. "So what happens now?" The woman beside me leaned just slightly, her temple brushing my shoulder. "We don't have to decide that tonight," she murmured. The one holding my hand gave a gentle squeeze. "Tonight, we just stay here, together." And so we did, linked by hands, by silence, by a choice none of us had spoken aloud, but all of us had made. By the time I looked toward the windows again, night had fully settled. The glass reflected only our outlines, faint shapes against the soft circle of light from the desk lamp. Beyond the walls, the world moved on, unaware of the stillness we'd found inside. None of us rushed to break it. Their hands remained in mine, one resting lightly on my right, the other threaded gently through my left. My shoulders were no longer tense. My breathing had slowed. For the first time all evening, I wasn't waiting for the silence to fracture. I wanted it to last. The woman at my side shifted closer, enough that her temple came to rest lightly against my upper arm. The contact was simple, almost casual, yet it sent a calmness through me that words never could. Her perfume lingered faintly, warm and floral, mingling with the dry scent of chalk and paper in the room. The other woman, still holding my hand, turned slightly so her body angled toward mine. She lifted her gaze, studying me as though searching for proof I wouldn't pull away. When she found only stillness in my eyes, her shoulders softened, and she brushed her thumb once more across my knuckles in a slow, deliberate gesture. No words passed for several minutes. It was astonishing, really, how presence alone could feel like enough. Finally, the woman resting against me exhaled a quiet laugh. "This wasn't how I thought today would end," she whispered. Her colleague smiled faintly, her voice gentler still. "Maybe it's how it needed to." I let their words settle in me. A part of me still fought the doubts, age, perception, the invisible lines we were crossing. But stronger than that was the sense of connection, the knowledge that none of this had been forced or contrived. It had grown slowly, in glances, in silences, in the unspoken pull of people who saw something familiar in each other's loneliness. I tightened my hold on their hands, not with desperation, but with quiet certainty. "Whatever this is," I said softly, "I don't want to pretend it isn't real." The one leaning against me tilted her face slightly, just enough for her cheek to brush my sleeve. "Then we don't," she murmured. The other gave a small nod, her eyes glinting in the golden light. "We keep it simple. No labels. No rushing. Just here. Us." And it was enough. Eventually, we rose from the desk together, the scraping of chairs sounding far louder than before. I half expected the spell to break when we moved, but it didn't. When they gathered their things, they stayed close, shoulders brushing, arms brushing mine as if by instinct. As we stepped into the hallway, the building was silent, the night air cool and clean as it slipped through the cracked windows. I realized, walking between them, that the unease I had felt earlier was gone. In its place was something steadier, something fragile yet undeniable, belonging. I hadn't just stayed after class. I had stepped into something that felt like the beginning of a story none of us had planned to write, yet all of us had chosen. And as the three of us left together, I knew with quiet certainty, this wasn't about lessons anymore. It was about us.